Welcome to the DIY Writer Show with the mild-mannered, slightly heroic host, Jeff Bacon.
This is Jeff from the DIY Writer Podcast, and today I have an author, a kayaker, and also a teacher who has some pretty interesting things to say, possibly about the Celts. But first, we're going to talk about his brand new release, Foundations, which came out in October of 2020. I'd like to introduce TJ Altieri. TJ,
hey, great to meet you.
How you doing?
I'm doing well. How are you doing?
I'm doing okay. You know what? It's a wonderful Monday right before Thanksgiving. And things are, just kind of, I guess they're not looking up, but whatever. It's cool. It's Monday. I'm alive. Whatever.
I hear you.
So you got this book that came out in October. Why don't you tell us about it?
Yeah, Foundations. It's a novella. It's not the longest piece ever, but I tend to write novellas. It's an archaeology story and an adventure story at heart. I've actually done some archaeology, and though I'm not the most well-read in archaeological fiction, pop culture portrays archaeology and anthropology in a very specific way. And something about that, as much as I like Indiana Jones and Tomb Raider and all the stuff you see, Da Vinci Code type stuff out there, something about me being on digs and in excavations, I felt like there's something not being said about the actual discovery that goes on, the type of discovery that goes on.
Just for fun, did you take a bullwhip?
Well, I have one anyway. As an Indiana Jones fan, I had to. I'm not going to elaborate on other uses of it.
All right.
I do have a fedora too, so I don't know. Take that for what you will.
All righty. I'm sorry, go ahead.
It's no, absolutely. It's not to pan Indiana Jones or any of these type of adventures or Clive Cussler books, because actually I'm a big fan of those. But I just felt like there was a certain aspect of discovery that wasn't being tapped into. And it's something that I feel like with archaeologists and anthropologists that I've worked with in the past, that they felt like was not accurately reflected. So I tried to kind of insert that into a story I think would be entertaining. A lot of these types of adventure stories, and don't get me wrong, Foundations is still quite an adventure at heart. A lot of these types of adventure stories involve people traveling all over different places. It's more centered around one artifact or some sort of relic, some sort of magical item that the Nazis are chasing you or antiquities dealers are chasing you. And I got a little bit of that type of stuff going on for dramatic purposes, but I don't know that they captured some of the real exhilaration that goes on in that type of field of study when you're working in excavations and with different cultures. So my aim there was really to kind of get that across to, the layman, as well as maybe make some archaeologists, anthropologists say, maybe this guy gets it. So,
okay. So you were on a couple of digs. Can you kind of explain that for us? I mean, what's that like?
Certainly. I haven't been on any as exotic as the one featured in my story, unfortunately. I wish I could have in the South Pacific, but I've lived on the Eastern Seaboard most of my life, and the majority of the excavations I went on were here. The first 1 and 2 that I were on were academic ones, so they were funded by my alma mater, Hofstra University. One of them was in Jamaica, Queens. Of course, when I say that, people think I'm on a tropical island, but I'm actually in, Queens, New York. Okay. We were excavating Rufus King. He was an early abolitionist before it was like a fashionable political thing to do. His property, which is in King Park in Jamaica. So, that really got me the bug for the excavation process. And what I really loved about it was just like the fusion of the actual physical labor, the academic side of it, the analysis, and then the detective work that goes in. I think you see lots of hints of that in some of these stories and movies, but a lot of intuition and sort of forensic detective work can go into it. So I did that for a while, did a few other digs with Hofstra. And then for a while was doing cultural resource management, which is government mandated archaeology. It's a hell of a lot less fun. It's more like beg it and take it and getting the hell out of there. So that scene in the end of Indiana Jones where everybody's looking at that giant warehouse, maybe not the magical relics there, but there certainly are backlogs of artifacts that people have yet to go through. Was doing that in Virginia and DC and around that area, upstate New York a little bit too. So those were really my excavation experiences. Some were Native American sites, some were historic colonial American, some were Civil War sites.
Sure. I've always heard that like the Smithsonian has a backlog of, so many decades of stuff to go through in warehouses.
Mhm.
And there's a lot of things that may get misplaced or stolen or whatever just because they have so much stuff.
Absolutely. I used to work at the Metropolitan Museum of Art in New York City too, which was a great experience for me.
Mm-hmm.
And it's amazing because it's like 2 million square foot of artwork, from mummies to like Renaissance paintings. And they would tell us about the warehouse that they had, again, in Queens, that had 3 times the amount of artwork in it. So, what you see in a museum, what you see in, like you said, in the Smithsonian is a small piece of what is actually acquired.
What they actually have there. So Foundations, again, was released in October of 2020. You also have Controlling Interest, which was released just a year earlier. What's that all about?
That one's a little bit more like political superhero, supervillainy type.
Mm-hmm.
It's definitely deep and obvious with its social commentary, but the basic premise of it is a guy that I'm hoping the reader can kind of come to their own opinion on whether this guy is more of a hero or a villain, anarchist, or someone who's trying to do the right thing in society. He's somebody who's gained power, gained money kind of anonymously through his life, and he sort of uses that to create a little empire of disorder to show the world, what's what people should really value. So it's a little bit like a rich Robin Hood sort of flipping things on his head, with a kind of anti-consumerist attitude toward it. And the whole point of it, I think, was really to bring it. We often see heroes in archetypes, and we see villains in archetypes, and every once in a while there's something I feel like that makes you straddle that line and wonder, like, where is the line, and how much of it, how much of what somebody's doing really is could be considered righteous, or is this just a cost benefit analysis of what they do and how they affect society. So I think a lot of writing that was exploring that idea and hoping that maybe some exaggerations of things that really do happen in the world could bring that up and bring that to light. It was a fun thing to write, definitely.
So you're also a teacher, though. So you kind of, if I'm not mistaken, social studies?
Correct.
Okay. So as you're teaching these classes, is there just your thing's still shaking, by the way?
I'm sorry.
No, that's no problem. I just wasn't sure how to politely let you know, hey, your table shaking, but anyway, no big deal. The type of political stuff that you're writing there must be kind of interesting when you are teaching social studies and some of the topics that you get in there. Do you ever make up stories for your kids or anything like that, or
Yeah, we do a lot of scenario work. I teach civics, so of course you got to stay as unbiased as possible and as objective as possible. I will say that, like, some of the stuff I'm writing is pretty opinionated and judgmental. I mean, I'm a human being, and I'm also not afraid to let my students and the public at large know. I know a few teachers that use pen names, pseudonyms, and things. I totally understand that completely, especially given the climate of certain things and certain people's attitudes toward teachers. I won't say the public or the entire public, but I also feel like it's important to counter that by me, exercising my out of work life with, publishing what I want to publish and whatnot. I haven't received any fallout or flack from it. Ironically, I actually had a few students read just because they were interested. They heard me, I wrote something, and they read it, and their parents read it, and they enjoyed it. So, just as like a evaluation of its impact on people, I'm glad that's the case. But you're bringing up something interesting about, like, the connection between this job and writing. There are a lot of writers, authors that are teachers or professors, and whether they have tenure or not, or job security or not, they might be a little apprehensive to put their stuff into the public sphere because of that. I don't know why it never bothered me. Of course, if I suffered some flack from it, I might change my mind if I got some criticism for it. But I like to make those connections, and I like to try and put what I'm teaching about or what I'm digging about with archaeology, into what I'm doing. So far so good. So far it's been well received and not gotten in the way of the teaching, maybe even
Well,
supplemented it.
and I think it also really depends on what you're writing.
Yes, absolutely.
If you're writing erotica, you might want to get a pen name.
Exactly. Yeah. Exactly. I mean, you're absolutely right. And don't get me wrong, some political attitudes can be pretty damn controversial, and especially with, again, like with the climate of things and information versus misinformation and things like that. But it is also work of fiction, and people need to suspend their disbelief to some degree. Art is used to, show us the lens of reality, or it's a lens to show us reality. So,
and then I agree with the thing I think was interesting about being an author versus, let's say, being a painter. You can paint something that would include nudity, and everybody would say, oh, that's okay, that's cool, or sculpt something or whatever. You write about it, and there's a lot of people who get really judgy about it.
Yeah.
So if you could take the same painting and write a story about it and go into a great deal of description of the painting, and it'd be like, you pervert.
Yeah, that's a good point. I never thought of it that way, but that's absolutely right. Is this idea of like certain types of art being acceptable in a certain medium than others. One of the connections I do see with that, it's not so much about what's appropriate and inappropriate, but I do talk about this with some other writer friends and in my writing group about how if you're an artist in another medium, whether it's painting, a musician, you can just bang out a guitar or show someone you're painting quickly. It doesn't take a lot of time and investment for someone to be impressed. They can be dazzled by a song in a minute, or a YouTube video that's 3 minutes long, or a painting that you glance at. But writing, people associate it with work, especially people who don't like to read. So it's weird. I feel like it's harder to get that sort of artist respect in some ways, because there's so many people that just have like a apprehension for reading, because either they associate it with work, school, or they're literate, but they're not interested in reading fiction. So I don't know if other writers are feeling that too, but I definitely feel like I really sometimes wish I could just be like, here's a synopsis, be impressed. No, it takes time and investment to get that same type of recognition. And I always wonder if other writers feel that way about it as well.
I think that I know that in my writing, I use mine's dark fantasy. It's not for kids. Okay. It is not for anybody 18 and under. Although I know some kids that have read it, and I'll get blasted every now and then for the language in there, but the language is in a setting where it's completely appropriate, and I actually trimmed it down. But the language is still bad. And I'll have people, actually, I mean, there's somebody in the town I live in that blasted me for it. And what was really funny was, okay, they talk like a trucker when you're out in the bar with them. And it's like, seriously, you blasted me for that? Well, yeah, I mean, there's no reason to read it. Everybody says it. And it's like, it's a part of society, buzz off.
Yeah. And you're doing it for art, not just to like, have conversation or byplay with somebody.
Well, if you're walking down the mall or you're in a restaurant or whatever, and you hear somebody, you hear people talking, what are deemed as curse words now, or foul language or whatever, is used all over the place.
Yeah.
You teach kids in a school.
Oh God. Yeah.
You'd
think
they might drop the
F-bomb
F-bomb every now and then. What's that?
Yeah. You'd think there were longshoremen in the hallway.
Yeah.
There's so many comparisons I can make between when I was in school and other people that had gone to school more than 10 years ago were in school, and how things are different. But it's just amazing the stuff that I would get in trouble for. You use swear words or curse words in my school, you got your ass in trouble. You got detention. You got some sort of consequence. Now it's like this new exemption or absolution called saying my bad. Like that's enough to get out of it. And it's weird because like sometimes a student will say, let an F-bomb fly because they're passionate and they're giving a little response to something. And I won't like chide them for it because I want the content and substance of what they're saying to be heard. slips. But you're right. People can get really fussy about that, and they don't think about the venue. They also don't think about the fact that, not everything you write is a representation of what you're thinking. Not every character you are writing is, if you're writing for a racist or prejudiced character, it doesn't mean you have those same racist ideas. So I think a lot of times people don't understand the idea between the exposition of that narrative and endorsement. And I mean, I don't think that's with the writer. I think that's with the reader.
Well, you have to do more than just say he was a racist. You have to actually show them that this guy was racist, or what, my main character is in the military, and most of the people that he deals with are associated with the military in some form or fashion, or, have been in wars. Well, they talk a particular way.
It's true. I read a little of Dark Side of Good. Really, really cool. I was noticing that about the byplay of the briefing in an initial chapter. And it's important because I've read and known people in the Marines that have been to Afghanistan, into Iraq and places, all over the world. You got to capture it. You got to capture it. And you have to do that in any way you can. You don't want to curtail dialogue just because of someone's sensibility. If they don't have the sensibility to get over that and see what you're really trying to do, I don't know. It doesn't sound like the problem's with the writer, in my particular opinion.
I was just trying to write a novel, so we'll see what happens. But
yeah.
So, one of the things that kind of interests me is as far as being a teacher, how's that going for you right now? I mean, everything's virtual now, I assume, for you. It seems like all the schools are virtual now. How is that? I mean,
it's you can probably tell from my sighing, it's not as easy as the general public seems to think it is. My particular district, the cases in that Connecticut city are high, and they were very close to bringing us back to this very in vain hybrid model where essentially most of the kids were at home anyway. So I will say that the decision to keep it to virtual until mid-January is a relief for me, in the sense that I don't need to worry about getting sick. It's one less thing, any more than anyone else does anyway. It's a little bit of a relief that sense. And that I can plan a little bit beyond a week because there's less ambiguity. As far as the whole dynamic goes, in a lot of ways, it's the virtual distance learning is working better than I thought. I'm getting a lot more participation from students in general than I thought I would, and better attendance, some real insight here and there. But I mean, that's not everybody. There are certain students that they need that in-person time. And I don't think it's important. I don't think it's necessary for anyone to take any physical health risks because of it, but I totally understand their difficulties with it. And I don't know if I could speak to the entire teaching or student population about it. I can tell you I think a lot of the general public thinks that we're working for 4 or 5 hours a day and then we shut our computers. I really wish that was the case. I really do. There's still the amount of extra time we spend grading, and now there's all these technology problems that we need to resolve. And you can't jump down a kid's throat for not working, because if it is a technology problem, you kind of lose credibility. It might legitimately be an issue. So it's got its pros and cons. I don't know if it's going to stay in the long run the way people are hoping it is. Hopefully we will be able to go back sometime in the relative normal, relative normalcy in the future. But it's rough. I'm sure you're hearing a whole bunch of different opinions people are about that. It's tough, and it's good at the same time. I'm making it roll, and the kids are still learning, and I think they're doing pretty well given the circumstances.
Do you find it harder to actually present the material online versus in person?
It depends. I mean, a lot of what I do, I try to integrate all different types of media and interactive stuff as much as I'm able to into whatever lesson I'm doing. So if it's the kind of thing where it's technology dependent, it's easier to do it this way. It's easier to mitigate those things and make it more interactive and whatnot. But I mean, we're also dealing with certain populations of students that, whether they have learning disabilities or they have, they just don't learn from that visual, modality. They learn from like a kinesthetic modality. So like me arranging the classroom a certain way might help them understand like the way Congress is spread out, or the different houses. So it all depends on what content you're teaching and what your audience is. In some ways easier, in some ways a lot tougher.
Yeah.
definitely a trip, though.
I would think that, I mean, these podcasts are kind of cool, but when I'm really want to talk to somebody, I want to see them face to face. I want to be eyeball to eyeball. I really enjoy that. I can't get as much of a feel for a person when I'm talking to them over like a Zoom call or something like that,
Right.
as I can, face to face. You can kind of see the micro expressions. You can kind of see, how things are, kind of playing with them or not. So you say something and it's like, ooh, they didn't like that, and stuff like that. When you don't see them, I find the same thing with texting or, something like that. It's like, yeah, kind of got to be careful because, with my dry sarcasm, it's really hard to portray that over texting. Especially speaking with people or trying to teach or do something, I find it extremely hard to do it if you're not just face to face with somebody. But
it definitely, I miss that. Like on a personal level, I miss it for the exact reasons you're talking, the nuances and just seeing people. I mean, we're also quarantined and isolated because we need to be, and many of us more than others. But you take for granted sometimes the social interactions you have. It's amazing because when I was in there in the building before pandemic and quarantine, there's times where I'm just like, when I'm done teaching for the day, I have an hour-long ride home, and it's like I don't want to talk to or see another human the rest of the day because my social bandwidth is exhausted. I didn't take into account how much positive that did me, how much good that did me because I was always so focused on being inundated with it. So, I miss my colleagues. I miss, like you said, the little things, the little mannerisms, the little getting to know you things that just don't work over this digital medium. So, yeah, there's definitely the social element for the kids and for the teachers, I think, is probably the hardest part to grasp and to deal with.
And I think that's part of the learning process. I mean, it's not just the data that you're being fed or the lessons that you get from history or social or civics or, whatever particular class you happen to be teaching, but that social interaction, if this is prolonged for more than, past January, if it's prolonged, let's say into next year, a year's worth of a lack of social interaction in school, I think it's going to tax this generation, or at least these couple of years. I think they'll be further behind in their social development.
Absolutely right. I'm seeing it already. I saw it when we moved to distance learning in the spring because I had those kids in person. And I saw the disconnect. I'm seeing some of the same kids again that are have me in another class, like a subsequent class, and they're not acting the same way. They're not getting fulfillment. I have to worry about their emotional well-being, and I'm all for that. I feel like any good teacher is going to try to do that to the best of their ability, to the best of their training. There's all this emphasis on social emotional learning, and so much of it is just fluff. So much of it is just simple stuff like that the kids know and that we already know. When it's not an effective surrogate for what you're talking about, for the interaction, the social dynamics that go on, the fitting in groups, collaborating in a certain way. You can put a kid in a breakout room in a Google Meet, but I mean, it's not the same as putting kids and forcing them to kind of work together and learn from each other. There is a lot that's being left, and I like you, I lament to think about the protracted distance learning because it is already affecting kids. I mean, think about the kids last year. They didn't have graduation. They had a drive-through graduation. Right. Okay, I wasn't so excited about graduating high school. I just wanted to be the hell out of there, to be honest with you. But I mean, if I didn't have that ceremony, I wondered that's a milestone being left out of my life or being altered.
Yeah. Being the age I am, I look back at graduation wasn't that big of a deal. Mm-hmm. But again, not having it would be what were you missing out of?
A lot of things are like that. I think a lot of things we don't realize the importance until they're gone, unfortunately.
We take for granted. And, especially if you go through them, it's it's all right. Walked up on stage, got a little piece of paper, woohoo, done.
Yeah. but yeah, it's taken its toll on this generation, especially if it takes longer, if it cancels out this whole year and into next year. You're right. We're talking about some of the most crucial years of social development being curtailed, shortened, altered.
Yeah. Excuse me. Woo, gotta stop smoking. Just kidding. I don't smoke. So what else are you into? You know, you got your teaching, you got your authoring.
Well, I've done a lot in my life. I'm lucky to say that I've had a lot of like cool and interesting experiences. So one of my other jobs is I work at a zoo. And I know that everyone wants to make up these jokes about you work at 2 zoos, at a high school and an actual zoo. And I'll tell them that I might get bitten and scratched more in the halls of the high school when the kids are in than handling a hawk or something, or a gator. I do conservation work at Beardsley Zoo in Connecticut. It's one of the best jobs I've ever had. I've run conservation education programs also with teen volunteers. So it's kind of still in the high school age range of management. We also do conservation projects where we clean up rivers, do invasive plant and species removals. So it's good. It's rewarding to actually go out into the community and like see something in the morning and then turn around looking like we improved this trail. We actually like put our money where our mouth was and like help the environment, help this species. It's also just a really fun job to have because I have great coworkers and I love the animals. It's fun. It's straight up fun.
So do you get to work directly with the animals then, or?
Sometimes. I'm not per se a zookeeper, but the education department has its animal collection that we keep exclusively for programs. That way we don't have an animal exhausted, in a habitat during the day and then we remove it, stress it out. We have specific animals with specific temperaments for that. So every once in a while I'll do an education program with some snakes or a gator, or there of course
no
some
Bengal tigers.
No, I do. I did get a chance to go see a Siberian tiger cub when we had them. Very, very last day we were able to do that. But it's always a risk. You see people taking pictures with wild animals, and if it goes well, it's a great selfie. If it goes not so well, it's a bad news story. So. We got to be careful with the kind of like, well, these are pets images that we portray at the zoo. They're not. But nevertheless, when are you going to have a crocodile or a tiger nearby that close to you, even as a baby? It's pretty damn cool. I'm not going to lie. It's pretty damn cool.
That is cool. That is cool. So how long have you been doing that?
Oh God, I've been doing that since 2010. So it's been it's been 10 years basically since I've been doing that. I do some filming work for them too. So I do like sort of videography work here and there and some editing as well, which is just something I like to do. But great job, great people. I'm happy to say that they're faring pretty well with quarantine because a lot of people want to go do stuff and they're very safe. They have their protocols in place. And people have been going consistently because it's something that they can do that's reasonably safe and not exactly run of the mill when you see wild exotic animals in Bridgeport in a zoo.
Sure. We've actually done that with our kids a few times just because it's one of the few places that are open and B, it's a fairly safe place to go. So
yeah, you got some good ones in Wisconsin, if I'm not mistaken.
There's a really nice one up in Madison, Wisconsin. That's basically, it's the Henry Vilas Zoo, and it's free, and they do a really nice job. I mean, it's a beautiful facility, and I feel like they take very good care of the animals, and it's always fun. We're always a little depressed when the penguins aren't out, but besides that. Everything else is pretty good, and they did a really good job of making sure the ingress and egress were separated, and you have a path you can go down, and they close down the playgrounds and all that kind of stuff, of course. Like I said, I think they've done, especially in Madison where the COVID's really rampant. I think they've done as much as they possibly could to keep the zoo open, and provide a place where people can just get the hell out of the house and go do something that's interesting.
Yeah, definitely. and just from the animal care perspective, like I'm not involved as much with the zookeeping, like I mentioned, and the caretaking, because I'm more in the education department. But I mean, like the amount of work that's going in to keep these animals healthy and safe is now even harder for those zookeepers too. And then they do
Sure.
most of their stuff behind the scenes. It's COVID was a zoonotic disease, so we had to worry about these types of things before it was a pandemic, because we're getting animals from Asia, we're getting animals from all over the world with we quarantine our animals when we first get them, and all AZA zoos go through that protocol. So I'm glad to say that the animals are healthy and safe and happy, and the visitors seem to be so too. And I know staff is. Was
it Denmark that had to euthanize 1 million minks, I think, or something like that?
I think so. They have an interesting. They tend to get in the news a lot. Let me put it that way. I think that was the same. I think it was the Copenhagen Zoo that had the giraffe that, instead of reintroducing into the wild, they decided to feed it to the lions in front of like everybody. Which,
oh, really?
Yeah. Again, I'm not necessarily saying that's right or wrong, but we were just talking about appropriate audiences, and I think there was just a bunch of school children. So I hope they had trauma counseling like on the way out.
They thought that was a good idea.
Yeah. And don't get me wrong, a predator in the wild would eat that. A lion might eat that, and they had some compelling reasons for not re-releasing it in Africa. But still, we do a lot of trading. My zoo does trading. A lot of zoos, we tend to trade animals for different breeding programs. We try not to do that.
I'm sorry.
Yeah, no.
Hey, let's go see the giraffe. Oh crap,
honey. Maybe not today.
Let me cover your eye. Let's go see the groundhogs. Sorry.
Yeah. Yeah, definitely. Lots of zoos in this world. Some similarities, some differences.
So I'm just because I'm a morbid SOB. So they just took the giraffe and just released it in the lion pen and said, "Okay, good luck."
I think they may have cut it into pieces first. Don't quote me on that. But I mean,
so it wasn't a live kill. It was
no.
Euthanized.
That's something I would hope that they don't do that, because that could stress out the animal too. And what a lot of people don't realize is that zoos don't go out and capture animals. They're almost all born in captivity, in human care. So they don't necessarily have the skills yet to be re-released, but we work on the training of those skills and behaviors. So doing that to an animal, it may have some instinct to attack, which it might go on. It might also not know what the heck it's doing, because it hasn't been cared for in its mother the same way it would be. It's relying on human care. But nevertheless, it was a pretty bold decision to do that. In full view of the public without any like warning of it. So I could understand a lot of sides of that argument. I don't know that I'd want my kids seeing it unless they were prepared for it. So
I'm just wondering how they marketed that.
I don't know. I wonder if it's I don't know if it's a cultural thing with Danish sensibility, or if it's just like a decision somebody made. But considering that, the Copenhagen Zoo in Denmark tends to get in the news a lot, I'm going to say it might have something to do with decisions people are making there. I don't know how it's working for them.
Yeah. Can you imagine if that happened in the U.S.? Man, that would just be
we unfortunately have a fair share of zoo stories gone wrong, with people climbing into habitats and things. I heard stuff with people going with Pokemon Go. They came into our zoo. They didn't get near any of our habitats because we were vigilant about it. But there were people that were like, "Oh, I want to go get the Squirtle or the Charmander in the exhibit." I'm like, you're looking at a real exotic animal at a zoo, and you're ignoring the fact it's dangerous and that's impressive, because you want to get a digital character that you could probably go pick up at 7-Eleven, because it's probably also at the 7-Eleven. So I don't know. It was I heard other zoos had problems with that
really?
App. Yeah. Maybe better leave the dangerous places off of the Pokemon map. Might be a good idea.
The only thing I was gonna bring up is, what if that happened in the US? And of course we have the Tiger King, that whole
oh goodness. Yeah, oh goodness. Unless you have another hour, you don't want to get me started on that. It's just amazing. People would tell me to watch it. I watched little pieces of it, and I got like so like, I understand it's just drama in a different venue, but like people don't realize that's promoting really irresponsible animal care. It's not
Well,
showing the best of zookeepers by any stretch.
you know, I lost the connection, but it just came back. You know why Denmark did that or Copenhagen did that?
Why is that?
Carol fucking Baskin.
Oh, okay, because she did everything right.
Obviously, she fed the.
It's a blanket excuse. It's why the election went a certain way. Carol Baskin's involved with everything.
Carol,
right?
she is a mastermind. Yes.
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 I should have put her in controlling interest instead of my character.
She's actually the one that walks around with the nuclear suitcase.
Yeah, handcuffed to her.
Handcuffed to her, yeah.
Wrist,
yeah. And the bones of her husband in the other suitcase, but whatever.
Tiger King. Oh goodness.
Yeah, I know. We kind of jump around a little bit here.
Hey, no, that's all good to me, man. It's all good to me.
So back to the kayaking trip you took. No, just kidding. You do have a website that's dedicated to kayaking too, which is another hobby of yours.
Yeah, it's sort of like an informal paddle club. You know, because a lot of the people that are into it aren't necessarily in my area, I like to kind of let it be for anybody who wants to post their stuff. It's called the Instagram is called Paddle Posse Kayak Sub Club. I can definitely share that out with you at some point. And I have a Facebook group called Paddle Posse. It's just a marginally unclever name I came up with it for it. But we do it. I mean, I tend to go on these kind of interesting trips to kayak places that are sort of weird. At least I try to. Mm-hmm. So particularly on my YouTube channel, you'll see videos of me paddling up to battleships. I went to Battleship Cove in Fall River, Massachusetts, right near Providence, Rhode Island.
Cool.
Yeah, it was cool. I was surprised at how close they let me get to it, but since it's a museum, it's not like real Navy active stuff. So, you know, we were able to get real close and get GoPro video of it. And the club, a bunch of people from the club went to that. We paddling next to Vallejo class submarines. Really cool. Another one that I think is the one that people tend to talk about the most, and I get a lot of comments on, is we paddled underneath Hartford, Connecticut. There's a whole paved river. I think it was paved in 1938 after a hurricane called Park River. And it goes into the Connecticut River, and you can go through it one way, but I'm only going to do that when I go through somebody's scouted it and been through it already. So what I tend to do is go out where it exits into the Connecticut River. And I had to go with a friend of mine who's more of a caver than a kayaker. So we needed light, we needed caving gear, we needed bow and stern lights. And we paddled a mile underneath the city of Hartford. And the echo was unbelievable. I mean, we're talking a mile of straight blackness. It was unbelievable. At one point, we like let out an echo, and we could hear the echo go around an object, and we paddled toward this object, and we realized it's an overturned car, probably from the 50s or 60s, that has been half submerged in the river. And we can actually hear the sound dynamics of it. So it was, if you like creepy stuff, this was damn creepy. You really need to like go online and research the course, because there's a couple of little, not drops, but little like holes that you can get stuck in. And it could be pretty hairy if the river water level is too high or low. It could be problematic. But I like to go on adventures like that. You know, we went to the Statue of Liberty. I'm sure a lot of people have done that, but you know, try to get as close as we could to that without the Homeland Security, you know, coming down on us. It's funny, I didn't see a harbor master or a Coast Guard, and it was Fleet Week, but I did see, I mean, helicopters were buzzing around New York Harbor like flies on a dead body. It was very hectic and interesting water dynamic to deal with, but very cool. When are you gonna get views like that, you know, especially from the water?
All you need to hear is just a little buzz up there, just a zzz, and look up, and there's your drone with a little camera on it.
Yeah, right.
Hi,
right.
CIA, how you doing?
Yeah, like I'm not a terrorist, I swear. I'm just paddling and like to get good fit photos. You know, that's it.
Yep. I
like cool stuff.
No, whatever.
Kayaking's fun, man. Kayaking. I don't know how I'm gonna work that into a story, but I'd like to, because I love it. I did a 30-mile paddle on the ocean one day. We went out to Mystic, Connecticut. We went around Fisher's Island on the ocean side of that island.
Just do your take on Deliverance with kayaks.
Yeah, right. Yeah. A lot of people make that analogy, especially when I'm in the bayou type areas down in Virginia. So I'm looking for all those actors from that movie around the trees. But yeah, I like to do it fun. I sometimes just like to do it for exercise, and then pictures of nature, as I'm sure you're well aware. I can get close to an eagle, get close to a moose. deer. It's fun stuff. Very fun stuff.
Ned Beatty had the hardest part in that whole movie.
I just keep thinking of the phrase, "You got a purty mouth." Every time I hear Deliverance, that's what I think about. So
that, and I hear banjos.
Yeah, banjo. Play paddle faster. I hear banjo music.
Yep, paddle faster.
Yeah. Good to talk to another kayaker. I like it.
Yeah, well, I haven't done any. I've only gone up to. I mean, the coolest thing. I mean, I shouldn't say the coolest thing, but the most memorable thing was going up to the Apostle Islands and doing the caves up there. That was the greatest thing I've done so far. The rest of it's just, little dips in here and little caves in here, and going down, the Wisconsin River and a couple of offshoots and, out on lakes and stuff. And it's all very beautiful.
Do you go with the family, or do you go by yourself, or kind of mix it up?
Usually it's been with family.
Cool.
Usually it's with family. For the most part, I don't think I've ever gone without my wife, now that I think about it. So yeah, pretty much family.
That's cool. If I'm ever in your neck of the woods, I'll give you a holler. Hopefully I'll
bring my have to.
Yeah.
Maybe we'll run up to Lake Superior and do the caves. That is.
I would love to, man. You're making me want to get get my kayak back on my car and drive out to Wisconsin during Thanksgiving here. But
yeah, you kind of got to wait till we're done with the whole COVID thing.
Yeah, a little bit.
You got to get your shots before you can travel nowadays.
Yeah, it's true.
Or whatever.
Your vaccine with only so much efficacy so far. You got to get
right.
that.
Yeah. I don't have a whole lot of hope for that vaccine. I really don't.
Either. I hate to say it. I want to. I don't want to be this guy that's saying we need to stay home. And I'm sure a lot of people feel that way, that they feel like maybe because they're being taking precautions and they have family members that have weak immune systems, or elderly family members, or I think a lot of people that are vehemently against some of the restrictions take this attitude well, people love this. Some people love being quarantined. I don't think there's too many people that really enjoy this, especially given the outcome of people getting sick. But I think that's part of some of the stuff we like to communicate in our writing. I know I certainly like to do, is that sometimes the difficult decisions are still the necessary ones. Sometimes unpopular, uncomfortable decisions, they don't give the leaders that make them, or the people who make them, a lot of acclaim, but that doesn't mean that they're any less impactful just because they're difficult.
Well, if you think about the quarantine and the way it's happened and the way the different governors have actually handled things in their states. I mean, some of them have been very loose. Some of them have been, no, you're not leaving your house. That type. I mean, it's been kind of all over the board, depending on how the states have handled it. But there are quite a few states where I think you could argue that there's been an extension of power that wasn't granted by the legislation.
Yeah. By
the governors. Which is, I mean, you can argue circumstances, you can argue safety, you can argue whatever you want. But, it comes down to, okay, there's been an extension of power that probably shouldn't have occurred without some sort of legislative action. And what I find as a fiction writer very interesting is that it's not that far of a leap from every dystopian novel that I've ever read. Somebody grabbing power, no one says anything, so they grab a little more power, they do, and I kind of wonder how much of that's going to be contained in the fiction that's coming out in 2021 or 2022. Are we going to have an influx of more dystopian and probably anti-vaxxing, or of course my jump's always been with this new vaccine that probably hasn't been tested as much as vaccines in the past. Is this the part of the zombie apocalypse we're going to have?
Or going to make something evolve or worse. Yeah.
Yeah. Or, mutants or, whatever. I mean, that's X-Men was due to a vaccine, if I'm not mistaken, that.
Yeah, there definitely there were parallels in fiction about that stuff. And yeah, absolutely. It's interesting that you bring up the pandemic response in fiction writing, because in the writing group, one of the writing groups I'm in, the one that I'm most active in, a few of us have moved on to certain new projects, and we're writing projects that are contemporary, but we're all asking ourselves, should we be starting to include the pandemic as like history? Should we not writing scenes in restaurants that aren't socially distanced? Should we start embracing this as part of our stories, even if a virus isn't the main theme or premise of the story? It's weird because I find it. I wouldn't say that I feel particularly restricted by, my state's restrictions. And I feel like there's a difference between mandates that are about public health and the good of everybody versus like straight up like, bias restrictions and trying to take away people's freedoms en masse. But, writing wise, it's like, shit, like I'm writing something now. I'm like, do I include the fact that the pandemic's going on? Would that be good for people to read? Will that get in the way of what I'm trying to do? It's right now, I think my strategy has been to just pretend like it hasn't happened and keep writing the way I would, because some of my ideas haven't factored in coronavirus and COVID and the quarantine. But I wonder, is that something that you're going through, that you hear other people going through with their contemporary stuff?
I think what I'm seeing, I shouldn't say seeing, but I haven't really read anything that's been reflective of this yet. I think a lot of authors, I've got a book that I've been kind of sitting on and I've rewritten it now. But it's got a kind of an anti-vaccine premise to it. Mm-hmm. And it's not because I'm an anti-vaxxer. It's just because it really works well into the story.
Of course.
And when I was going to release it, it was right in the middle of the first quarantine in March. And I'm like, nah, can't do that. And I was going to get it edited and everything else. It's like, And now I'm just like, I put that part back in, and because I had taken it out at one point in time just so I could release the book, and now I'm putting it back in. And I'm just, kind of like, screw it. But I think what you're going to see is anybody who's writing short stories that are, of the urban fantasy nature, and if they're going to put them in 2020, I think you're going to see that depicted in here. And it'll be interesting to see what they come up with for, why they're doing it, or, whatever, conspiracy theories you can tie to it. But I think in general, I think you'll probably see it coming out in short stories faster than you will any novels, because everybody's got their novels planned out. I mean, if you're in the middle of a series, you're not going to just all of a sudden say, hey, we're wearing masks all of a sudden, that doesn't really fit into the world you're probably built. But a short story or a horror story or, whatever you're doing from a fantasy fiction standpoint, oh, absolutely, you could write that in a week and throw that out there just for entertainment on Medium or whatever you're doing.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's interesting. It's like towards the beginning of this, I made a comment. I'm sure many people have made it in other ways too. I said, everybody's ready for the zombie apocalypse. They have those stickers on the car, zombie response team or whatever. But when the zombies show up as little microscopic germs, then their AK-47s and the $1 trillion military budget's not doing real much for it. So it's just amazing how we have this vision, or many people have this vision, all these different visions of a dystopian future, some of which, like you said, are the stepping stones we're seeing. And I'm not a particularly paranoid person, but, we have to be vigilant about some of the types of decisions being made, some of the conspiracy theories that hold water and other ones that have no base to them. It's an important time, but I can imagine that being confining for a writer, because what if you just like to write about zombie apocalypses? What if you just were like a pandemic fan before it was like at least taking hold in the US, where it's now part of our everyday dialogue and functioning? That's confining. I have found parallels, not to shift just a little bit. I have found certain parallels with my writing when it comes to like Foundations is about a fictional Native Indigenous society. And I was very set on making it a fictional society. So, like I'm trying to think about, well, am I reflecting Indigenous societies accurately here? But there isn't just one way to reflect an Indigenous society. I actually ran it past an archaeologist, anthropologist colleague of mine. And though she liked it, she mentioned some things that I definitely saw as potential problems, but at the same time, like I need to sometimes take a dramatic license. And these aren't real people. The whole point of me making them not a real group is to make the reader infer some statements, I guess, about anthropology, archaeology, indigenous society and culture. But I mean, there's some suspension of disbelief. And it's amazing how someone could note that. I guess it's because their anthropological lens is so stuck on that. They can note that, but then they can dismiss some of the narrative things that I would have been like, well, I'm surprised you weren't amazed at that and didn't call that hokey or something. But it's just weird. It's like I'm finding that I like to write about things that I'm not, like societies and cultures that I'm not a part of, that I might have some information on. Right now I'm working on something that involves a Native American character, Hopi Native. And there's not a lot of information I can get from people who are Hopi because everybody's struggling on the res, and quarantine is making it rough. So it's like, and I also sort of feel bad. It's like, I want to represent people from at least some different internal perspectives, but my anthropological mind is making me feel a little guilty. I don't want to gloss over things, but I want to do them justice. And I feel like that I know it sounds like a little bit of a stretch from the pandemic conversation we're having, but accurately reflecting things and with what they are and your intentions, sometimes they don't always necessarily go run parallel. Sometimes you just want to write a story. Sometimes you just like zombie apocalypse. And The Stand was written before the pandemic. A lot of these virus books were written, and a lot of those virus books are a lot more worse than what we're going through in a lot of ways.
Did you see that Twitter argument King got into with one of the readers?
I heard about it, but please elaborate.
The reader's like, oh my God, this is so much worse than The Stand. And King comes in and says, no, it wasn't. Did you read my book?
Yeah.
And the guy said, did you read the book? And the guy said, yeah, I read the book. Didn't you? And, he's talking to Stephen King.
Oh my God.
It's like, oh, really? You just asked the author of The Stand if you read the book. Okay. Nice job there.
That's, maybe before you critique, you should kind of like, look into that.
Did you recognize the name? I'm just curious.
Oh goodness. Yeah, no, you're right. It's true. It's not like I'm not trying to downplay what everyone's going through. The sadness of the fact that people need to be kind of quarantined from their families in their last week of life, like last weeks of living because of it. It's dreadful. It's definitely something we as America haven't gone through like this. That's caused such a drastic change to our
you had the Spanish flu.
It's true, but I wonder, was it so widespread, and was our consumer culture so dependent upon commerce in that same way back then? I'm not saying it's not certainly a microcosm of
it. It was probably not as, from everything I read. I mean, you had people back in the early 1900s wearing masks, and you had, ships that were basically held in harbor so they wouldn't, until they figured out whether or not they're infected or not. I mean, they didn't have the, 20-minute test that they have now. They can't just spit in a tube.
That's true. Yeah.
Or anything like that. They had to actually, okay, 7 days to see how many of them drop. And if they do, then we're just going to, burn the ship, or whatever. I mean, there's,
that's a good point. Yeah. The Spanish flu, I mean, I don't know numbers wise, which is more widespread, but it was a long time ago. It doesn't mean it should be dismissed. It's definitely something Americans have gone through.
Well, and you go through history, this type of stuff has happened over and over and over again.
Yeah, especially places not here, not place, just because it doesn't happen to us in the United States as frequently as it might happen in other parts of the world. It's just one of the things that gets me is, like, I talk to my family. My family lived through the Cold War, like many people, I'm sure. And, we talk about like mutually assured destruction and sirens, and them sort of like their parents sort of telling them like, you're going to wake up tomorrow, but like there's all this fear and, confusion about the future. Even then, with nuclear holocaust, which could wipe out every life on this planet, not just what we're seeing now, people were still allowed to congregate in their churches. People were still allowed to hug their family. Like, there's a dynamic to this that is particularly pervasive and sad, because it tears at the fabric of our social being as humans. Like you were saying about the kids and how their social emotional learning is just as important as the content they're learning in school. And I guess that's what's really striking me about it, is that we're trying to evolve. And yeah, we got Uber Eats to deliver us food. We got all these delivery things that people didn't have back in the Spanish flu. We have virtual teaching that we couldn't do back then. You're absolutely,
people are a lot more self-sufficient. They had gardens.
You're right. That's another point. There was less of that. Jobs, there were more labor jobs. There were more a variance of skill levels and not just like these two paths you go on. So it's interesting to see that. So many people have written about it. I wonder how much of the reality of like the social impact of this like, I don't want to like exaggerate, but like this disassociation, it's like forced disassociation. I mean, people think about people are going back in a couple of days for Thanksgiving. I know a lot of people have called it off. I've heard this argument between a person I respect and another person I respect. One of them, which was saying that if you're in New York, the governor asks if you see your neighbor having a gathering over 10 people that you report it. And the person went on to post, well, you know, you should think about that before you ask your neighbor for help and borrow things for them. Like, you shouldn't rat out your neighbor. And I totally understand where that person is coming from. But I also understand that this stuff is not going to get under control if we don't make some difficult and unpopular decisions. And it's so hard.
So, yeah, it's difficult and it's unpopular. But on the other hand, you can't nonchalantly just take away somebody's freedom to gather.
Yeah, it's true.
I mean, realistically, I mean, those are things that you can't just wave your hand and say, you're not going to do this. And if you do, we're going to arrest you, you know, and then you're stepping into a realm in the United States that we've never been in before, where that it almost feels like it's totalitarian. It's, you know, some sort of a governorship in a dictatorship that we pretty much have fought every war against. And so, you know, that goes against the fabric of the United States.
Yeah, definitely. It speaks to our personal liberties. I think I don't know if I would have the same fears exactly about totalitarianism. I think I'd be a lot more, and I'm not particularly like a gun guy. I'm like completely ambivalent to the Second Amendment. Like, I have a gun. If they told me to get rid of it, I wouldn't care. I'm just that kind of guy that rides the fence on that particular issue. But if I saw that, like, there have been people paranoid about that through the Obama administration, through Trump administration. My sister's boyfriend works for a gun retailer, and he'll tell you that even though there was a fear of people taking their guns away, nothing happened, and people bought more and more. But you know, like, I don't know. I think I personally need to see some a little bit more strict and across the board things. But that doesn't mean, as you put, it doesn't mean that we could relax about this, because a lot of people have exerted their fascist power or their autocratic power by starting with things that are relatively small.
Everybody worries about one step too far. You know, is what's going to happen? Is this one step too far? Is this going towards, you know, oh my God, we're going to a dictatorship. This is fascism, you know, and they'll term it whatever they want.
Mm-hmm.
You know, and it may be the right term, it may not be, but you know, it's for dramatic effect.
Yeah.
And, you know, the thing that really bothers me is everybody will rationalize their argument with some sort of a feel-good statement, like it's for the children, or it's for the elderly, it's for this, it's really towards the safety of this, that, and the other thing. You know, you know, when I think about the mask, I wear a mask when I go out.
Mm-hmm.
You know, when I go into the store, I wear a mask because it's required. You know, and I'm fine with that. It doesn't really bother me. But on the other hand, my father-in-law is in a nursing home. Everybody's masked and everything else, and they had corona go through the, you know, he got tested positive. You know, and everybody's wearing masks, and they're locked down. I mean, they're, you know, just one of the workers caught it, you know, and spread it in there. And just kind of looking at Wisconsin itself and how you know, the rates of infection are going up and up and up and up. It's like, I'm not sure what we're doing is all that great in the first place.
Yeah,
You know?
I mean, it doesn't help that the CDC and the different powers that be keep kind of coming up with contradictory findings every 2 minutes. And I'm not one of these guys that's so
isn't that crazy? I mean, you used to be able to trust the CDC, and now they put out different fucking numbers every week.
Yeah,
it's like, well, it's not that bad. It's somewhere between 19,000 and 100 million that are going to die. Okay, well, thanks for narrowing that down there, Mr. Scientist.
Yeah, and like, again, I'm not trying to sow distrust in all institutions, but I mean, if you don't know, how about this? You say you don't know and stand by until you actually, you know, the same thing with the vaccine you're talking about. It's very dangerous to get people excited about this thing. And you know, I'm not one to say that one news is fake news or that news or whatever. But I do believe that there's sensationalism going on, an exhibition going on. So if they can tantalize you with hope and fear, they're going to do that. So I think a lot of what we're saying comes down to, like, people aren't willing to take anywhere near the middle road, one extreme or the other, one polarized point of view or another. And it's, who knows what's helping, what's hurting if we think like that.
I've talked to several people in the in healthcare that have said that it takes at a minimum 18 months to get an effective vaccine created.
I've heard the same.
And, that's if everything goes right. And that's if the virus doesn't mutate and change. There has to be 70% of the original virus intact in whatever happened, and that's one of the reasons why the flu vaccine is not all that effective.
Yeah,
is because the flu just changes on a whim.
Mhm.
And all of a sudden, the vaccine you get this year is only 30% effective against, the new flu that's out,
Yeah, you're
whatever.
right.
Which is fine. I mean, you're still safe against that 30%. I get that. But on the other hand, trying to push something out there for, the one industry I don't trust is the drug companies. I don't think they have our best interest at heart ever.
I concur 100%. There's a lot of that in controlling interest. A lot of critique of pharmaceutical companies. Like, I don't care if they become our savior in this, which I don't think they would be. I think there's going to be a lot of hands that help us out of the situation. Why we still need to be scrutinizing them. They're a huge lobby in a lot of ways. I feel like my mom is a chronically ill woman. She needs lots of medications. There's a lot of people that don't. There's a lot of quack doctors that prescribe things that people get hooked on. There's a lot of not good testing going on. A lot, and these are billion to $1 trillion industries. There used to be a time where drug reps would come into my mother's office and be like, okay, doctors, use this Viagra pen, Viagra, because it was a urologist, Viagra pen, Viagra pad, use all this Viagra propaganda, essentially, write the scripts more frivolously than you need to. We'll fly you to the Bahamas for a golf. Like, to me, that's horrible. That's bribery. So I agree. I mean, it's just so much about the war on drugs, and then they don't even think about the legal drug dealers, drug barons going out there.
Nope, they don't.
I'm probably going to get in a black bag now after saying that.
I think we both are. I know you said, you being a teacher and you have conferences a day, that you had to be gone by 5. And
I could probably do another 5:10 if you have the time.
I do.
Sure.
I've got as much time as you got. So
let's do the 5:10 because I think my next conference is 5:15 and I'm good to go for it. So
okay, cool. So we've hit drug companies and the pandemic and everything else. And the one thing that I do think is that while I'm not a real big fan of quarantine, and I'm not a real big fan of shutting down the economy, when you can't prove that it really does any good. I think people are sneaking out. I think that in general, I think the U.S. is probably uncontrollable as far as that goes. And there's going to be certain segments of the population that they're going to go out and they're going to do what they do, and, they may be the ones that spread it. They may not be, so on and so forth. I mean, whatever it is. But if quarantine's not going to work, I think that they need to really work on efficient and fast testing. Realistically, yes. I think that's much more of a priority than worrying about everybody having a mask. If you can be tested within 20 minutes before you go to work and make sure everybody can go to work, okay, great. And if you're caught with the virus, I mean, something that's like a blood test or something like that, to say, okay, you have this, these signs or whatever. I mean, I understand it's not 100%, but on the other hand, I think that's much better than shutting down the economy and shutting down everything they possibly can and doing the social distancing and the masks.
Yeah, I definitely see what you're saying. I think it all depends too on the correlation of the numbers. Like if what I saw is when they opened schools back up, everyone got sick. So I know that there's definitely a hub exposure issue going on here. If you go to places that have lots of people, my school that I work has 4,000 students at it. Like it's going through it's like going through a concert like a mosh pit of a concert to
Sure.
get through the hall. Maybe a little less amicable than a mosh pit at a metal concert. But you know, so like I think there's certain things where it's like, okay, well, maybe a concert may not be the best thing to do, you know, but at the same time, you know, be efficient about it. You know what I mean? We talked about how the zoos are able to kind of meet halfway and accommodate people. And, you know, there's plenty of things, you know, they're talking about kayaking. Apparently you can't buy kayaks because they were selling out at the beginning of quarantine, because people all of a sudden were like, oh my God, I can do this. It's free. It's outside. I can do me with people like you and I probably discovered years ago. You know, so it's, I think you're right. I think it's about targeting the right things, and you know, I don't like the shutting down of the economy. I know people have lost jobs. I know people have died from COVID. You know, I had to go to a funeral. That was an interesting thing. It was someone unfortunate that was not very close to me, but it still was just really sad. And it's like you have to make this choice. Like the widow was like, I don't want to hug people. Like I'm like, I kind of like, I want to hug you. I don't want to get you sick, but I want to console you. And it's like, is this a pride thing? Is this a safety thing? It just, no matter how anyone feels about it, it's tearing at us in a lot of ways. And it just, it's sad that it has infiltrated our lives that way. And I think by targeting those right measures, the things that are working, that they do have actual correlation on, and like you said, weeding out the rest of the stuff that really might not be having making a difference, we'd be getting closer to getting this under control.
What I think will be interesting is 5 years down the road.
Yeah.
Looking back, okay, how many really stupid things did we do? And how many really good things did we do? You know, that vaccine, if that vaccine only helps 40% of the people, a lot of people would argue that, you know, okay, well, that's 40% that aren't going to get infected. Great. What about the other 60?
Yeah.
You
well,
know,
I mean, I would imagine helping some is better than helping others, but I think we can't deny.
Right. But then you have a false sense of security. So if everybody gets it, and all of a sudden 60% of people are still falling down with this thing and getting stuck on respirators and everything else, you know, what good is that? You know, I mean,
you're right.
That false sense of security can really screw something up, especially in a situation like this. You
Absolutely.
know, and I'm not questioning whether or not we're doing the right things or not, because I really don't know. But on the other hand, I have to sit back and wonder, you know, is this truly the best thing? And if we had some damn information to go on, again, you can't trust who, you can't trust CDC, because they flop all over the place depending on whether it's you know, some popular scientist or it's you know, political pressures or whatever's going on over there. I don't know. I've never seen them this way before.
Me either.
You know, I don't want to get stuck in a place where there's lots of people dying because they feel better about themselves because they took something that's supposed to help them.
I think that's an important concern to have. I would worry. I mean, a lot of what we're talking about here ends up being the quest for easy, quick answers. And whether we're in favor or not in favor of quarantine or the measures or any particular measure, I mean, I'm not trying to generalize Americans, but we are a society of fast food and instantaneous internet and things like that. In a lot of ways, I think you're speaking some truth when you say we need to look at this. A historian won't be able to evaluate what's going on in Nazi Germany in the midst of Nazi Germany. They need the benefit of time and patience. And I mean, look, none of us want to be isolated, so we're not going to be very patient about it. And like you said, some people, including myself at times, make decisions that are like, you know, I kind of sometimes just need to do it. You know, sometimes you need to make a judgment call.
How many times have you ran out to get something when you probably didn't need it, but just wanted to get the hell out of the house? And it's like, I won't get infected. How do you know? This thing spreads by, you know, I mean, it's everywhere.
Yeah. And I mean, you know, you're hearing people saying kids can get sick and then they can't get sick. You're hearing it stick on surfaces, it doesn't stick on surfaces. Look, I'm generally of the attitude, you know, better safe than sorry, but we're far enough along in this thing that I think we could start to be more realistic about it, like you're saying. At the same time, I really think there's some wisdom to what you're saying about hindsight. We need to process things. We need to be out of something to get kind of a less biased, a more objective kind of way to look at it. In fact, I'll connect it to archaeology. When you're working in an excavation unit for a long time under the blistering sun, you know, soil colors and stratigraphy layers look the same. You need to call someone in for a fresh eye because you become used to it, because you're kind of sort of desensitized to it or mired in it. So you switch up units every once in a while. Sometimes you need the time and you need the ability to kind of look at it, because like a lot of what we're saying here might not be very popular among people. People might be like, just do everything you need to do to protect it, or the opposite, you know, just forget it. It's a conspiracy. There is no coronavirus. Like we're kind of talking about looking at this in a sensible, judicious way, and I'm always in favor of doing that. I'm always in favor of trying to compare different viewpoints, statistics, and things like that. I think we try to find comfort in dichotomies in black and white because it's simply easier.
Now, just because we're going to run out of time here, I just want to just kind of wrap this up real quick.
Sure. Yeah.
And, you know, if everybody's wondering what the hell this conversation has to do with writing, is part of the process of researching and trying to figure out what you're going to write, whether it be fiction, nonfiction, whatever, is doing research and having these types of discussions.
Yes.
And actually thinking about things in a different way helps your writing.
Absolutely.
It helps you understand. So when you go back, if you're doing historical fiction, understand what the circumstances are, or if you're doing futuristic stuff, or if you're doing urban fantasy set in 2020, you know, these types of conversations, action and thinking about things like in a different manner than you're used to, is a studious way of creating what you want to put out.
Absolutely.
Of creating, you know, a book that's interesting, but also something that's well thought out. And it's, you know, that's why I love talking to authors, because you can get into these conversations about stuff that, you know, we may have zero expertise in. But what we do is we study what's happening, we study what's happened, and we study what we think is going to happen in the future to write our fiction. And more times than not, you'll read a fiction book that kind of foretells of what happens in the future. And it's a very interesting process. It's a very methodical process. And like I said, I love these conversations. Not that I'm looking to solve the world or lay blame on anybody, but to understand it better so that my writing's better. And
absolutely.
I appreciate the time you've given me. I know you said 5'10".
Yeah.
It's 5'11".
It's 5'11", but I'm all good. Don't worry. The kids haven't shown up yet. No, I absolutely agree. I think that the dialectic, this is a dialectic that we're having and that you have in your podcast, but the book writing is a dialectic in your head too. Your characters are speaking to each other. They're exploring these things. So why not talk about them? Why not explore them in real life? Absolutely.
Absolutely.
Cool.
Well, you know what, TJ, I want to thank you very much for your time today. I really appreciate
My pleasure.
That. And also, if you guys haven't looked at it, take a look at Foundations. It's on Amazon right now. It's released in October. And Controlling Interest, which was released a year earlier. And I will have all the links to TJ's website and also his paddle posse or posse stuff. I've got his Instagram and everything else, but you know, take a look at it and see what it is. I understand, I think I read someplace where and we didn't get into ancient Celts and that, which I'm kind of sad about, because I really want to talk about that, because that's great historical reference. So maybe we should
can I sign up a new one? Yeah, we should do it again. I could do a whole thing on that one for sure.
Why don't we do that, and we'll talk about that. Just email me and we'll do that. But yeah, I really wanted to get to that, but we didn't. But so we'll do another one.
My pleasure. I'd love to.
Okay. Other than that, I don't mean to cut you short, but it's been a pleasure. This is Jeff from the DIY Writer Podcast. TJ's got to go to a conference because he's a teacher and an educator, and he's got duties and I don't. So anyway, if you're listening to this right now, please subscribe or follow me on any medium that you happen to be listening to. And I want to bid you a very good day and keep your chin up. Bye-bye.
Please hit the subscribe button. I get a bonus for every subscriber, and I only need 1,506 more to become a full-time paid employee. Help me, please.